Hello friends, welcome back to Culips. You're listening to Real Talk.
Hello friends, welcome back to Culips. You're listening to Real Talk.
Real Talk is a series
where we teach you the English expressions that you need to know for real world situations. And today we are going to teach you how to make dinner reservations at a restaurant. Now I just said we're going to teach you. That means I'm joined by somebody else, so I should introduce my co-host for this episode. It's Cassie. Hey there, Cassie. How's it going? I'm doing great.
Perfect.
I'm doing great, Andrew. Thanks.
Cassie,
we also wanted to give a shout out to one of our listeners from Belarus, Victoria, who recently left us a 5-star rating and a nice review on Apple Podcasts. And Victoria left us such a kind message. Cassie, would you mind reading it for us all? So Victoria says, Hi there, I'm from Belarus. I came across this podcast a few weeks ago. I really enjoy listening to it since there are a huge number of different topics covered. I usually do it on my way to work or home. It's quite easy to understand and it really helps to read.
Full podcasts. And Victoria left us such a kind message. Cassie, would you mind reading it for us all?
Would you mind reading it for us all?
Sure. So Victoria says, Hi there, I'm from Belarus and I came across this podcast a few weeks ago. I really enjoy listening to it since there are a huge number of different topics covered.
I really enjoy listening to it. I really enjoy listening to it since there are a huge number of different topics covered. I really enjoy listening to it since there are a huge number of different topics covered.
I usually do it on my way to work or home.
I usually do it on my way to work or home.
It's quite easy to understand and it really
It's quite easy to understand. And
helps to enrich the vocabulary and
it really helps to enrich the vocabulary and listening skills.
I also like hearing your pleasant voices. Thanks for doing a great job.
Thanks, Victoria.
Thanks, Victoria, for that nice
review. And listeners, if you'd like to hear yourself at the start of an upcoming Culips episode, we would love to give you a shout out. So to do that, just leave us a 5-star rating and a nice review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And we will try to mention you in an upcoming episode.
All right,
let's get into our episode for today. Cassie, could you tell us what exactly we're going to cover? Coming episode?
Yes, so we're going to be listening to a conversation between a restaurant host and a person who wants to dine at that restaurant.
So we're going to be listening to a conversation between a restaurant host and a person who wants to dine at the restaurant.
We're going to be learning
what exactly we're going to cover.
Yes. So we're going to be listening to a conversation between a restaurant host and a person who wants to dine at the restaurant. And we're gonna be learning key phrases and questions that you might come across if you were to make a reservation. We are going to be learning key phrases and questions that you might come across if you were to make a reservation.
Conversation between a restaurant
host and a person who wants to dine at the restaurant. So we are going to be listening to a conversation between a restaurant host and a person and
be learning
exactly we're going to cover.
Yes, so we're going to be listening to a conversation between a restaurant host and a person who wants to dine at that restaurant.
And a person who wants to dine at the restaurant.
And we're going to be
learning key phrases and questions that you might come across. You might come across if you were to make a reservation.
Exactly. So
if anyone ever has to make a reservation for a restaurant in English in the future, this is going to be the perfect episode for you, and this is something that I think a lot of our listeners will maybe have to do at some point in their lives if they travel to an English-speaking country or just travel in general to a place where they don't speak the local language and the kind of international language that is used is English. So first up, we'll listen to the conversation and then we'll break it down and explain all of the key expressions that you listeners need to know. So let's take a listen to that conversation now. Let's do it. This is the Mystique.
Oh, hello. I'd like to make a reservation for 2 this Saturday.
Oh, hello. I'd like to make a reservation for 2 this Saturday.
All right.
And
what time will you be joining us this evening?
And what time will you be joining us this evening?
I prefer sometime between 7:30 and 8, if that's available.
I prefer sometime between 7:30 and 8, if that's available.
Okay,
let me see.
We
only have outside seating on the deck available at that time. Will that work for you?
Sure,
that'll be fine.
Okay,
I'll put you down as a party of 2 for 7:30, correct? Perfect.
And under whose name are you making the reservation?
And under whose name are you making the reservation? McGrady.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. McGrady.
We'll see you on
Saturday night.
All right,
Perfect. Thank you. All right, listeners. So we just heard a conversation between the host at a restaurant who takes a reservation and does customer service and the kind of thing at the restaurant, and a customer who would like to visit the restaurant on Saturday evening. The customer was making a reservation. So Cassie, why don't we go through this conversation now and highlight some of the important language that was used in order to successfully make their reservation.
I think we should definitely start with
the very first thing
the person making the reservation
said, which was, I'd like to make a reservation for 2
this Saturday.
this Saturday. I'd like to make a reservation for two this Saturday. Exactly.
So there's two things
So-
in this sentence that
So there are two things in this sentence
you may need
that
to
you may
change
need to
depending
change
on your
depending on
situation,
your situation, right?
When we
When we
say
say for
it
two,
means for two
it means
people.
for two
If you
people.
had
But if you had maybe a larger family or a larger get together, you had more people, then you would need to change that number. Of course, right?
Like to make a reservation for
I'd
four.
like to make
Like
a
to make a
reservation
reservation
for four. I'd like to make a reservation for six,
Exactly.
like that.
And then the second part you might want to
And then the second part you might want to change is the
day.
day. So in this example, it was a reservation for two this Saturday. But maybe you would have it on a Sunday or a Friday or a
And it
Wednesday.
might even be next week, so you might
And it might even be next week. So
not
you
say
might not say this Saturday, meaning the week that you are on currently, but
following week for the next
it could be for the following week,
week. So
for
I'd
the
like to
next
make a
week. So I
reservation
could
for
make a
three
reservation for
next
3
Wednesday,
next Wednesday, something like that.
exactly.
Exactly.
I mean,
some really fancy restaurants even require reservations,
like a month in
you know,
advance, right, Andrew?
like a month in advance, right, Andrew?
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. So you
absolutely.
might have to say
So you might have to say
your
your
ideal
ideal
time,
time, but if
if
the time is booked and busy,
then
they might say, "Oh, sorry, we're busy at that time. Oh, sorry, sorry, we're busy at that time." The earliest we could squeeze you in would be next month, something like that. So if they're busy, they would suggest the soonest available time that you could visit, and you would just have to go from there.
And Andrew, what's our next expression?
And Andrew, what's our next expression?
Well,
the customer says when he would like to make the reservation and how many people will be in that party. We call this a party. The people who will be visiting the restaurant are a party. So he says it's a party of two. They wanted to visit on Saturday, and then the host asks what time. What time in the evening will you be joining us? So what time will you be joining us that evening? And this is just a question that everyone should expect to be asked, because it is important for the restaurant to know what time you will visit so that they can get prepared for you.
So you would just choose a ballpark time that you'd like.
So you would just choose a ballpark time that you'd like.
Like in this case, between 7:30 and 8.
It was between 7:30 and 8. You could say you wanted an earlier time, like 5 o'clock, or later, 9 o'clock.
It all depends on what you need.
It all depends on what you need.
And Cassie, you just
used an interesting expression there, a ballpark. So
a ballpark
Cassie, you just used an interesting expression there, a ballpark. So a ballpark or ballpark figure is just an estimation, right? It's not like, oh, I'll be at the restaurant exactly at 7:35 p.m. It's more like a window, a gap of time, like between 7:30 and 8. That is usually how we will make a reservation.
Exactly.
So
following that, the host checks her computer and sees that actually the restaurant is full, but they do have some space outside on the deck. So they have outside seating on the deck. Some restaurants will also call this area the patio. So you might hear deck, you might hear patio, both are common. and that just meaning sitting outside of the restaurant. Because of COVID in North America, many restaurants have actually switched the layout of the restaurant to more of an outdoor dining area. So I think it's probably pretty common these days that many people are eating on decks and patios. So yeah, this is something that is kind of a new trend, but very popular these days.
Yeah, that's right. I think especially in the summer.
Yeah, that's right. I think especially in the summertime, this is popular anywhere, COVID or no COVID.
Yeah, I love it personally.
I love it personally. I like eating outside. Patios are awesome in my opinion. And then the customer confirms, yeah, that's okay. I'd like to sit on the patio, no problem. So the host responds by saying, I'll put you down as a party of two for 7:30. Correct? I'll put you down as a party of two for 7:30. Correct?
And this is
just a way to confirm that she has the information correct. Cassie, we talked about this party of two, right? Could you just remind us one more time what this means, party of two?
Yeah, so your
party isn't, like a fiesta, dancing, and food kind of party. This kind of party is how many members are eating together in your group. So a party of two would be two people dining together.
And then the last question.
All right, and then the last question, the last important piece of information that the host needs is the customer's name. So she asks, under whose name are you making the reservation? Under whose name are you making the reservation? And the customer responds, McGrady. And the host knows that this is the last name. So, Cassie, usually when you get asked this question, would you respond with your first name or your last name or both?
How would you
answer this question?
This is really funny.
This is really funny. I've never made
any reservations, but
I've never made many reservations.
But the few times I have, it would always be my last name.
But the few times I have, it would always be my last name.
Always your last name.
Always your last name. Yeah, I might
first name or my
I might give my first name or my last name in this situation, but I don't think we would give just our first names, right? Somebody said, under whose name are you making this reservation? Oh, Cassie or Andrew? Especially Andrew. Especially Andrew, my name is really common. It's one of the top names for boys in my generation. I think it's the fourth most popular boy's name from the 1980s when I was born. So if I say Andrew, it's too common. I need to say my first name and my last name, or just my last name, just to make sure I don't get confused with any other potential customers.
Yeah, this might be different in other countries.
Yeah, this might be different in other countries. I'm curious to hear what listeners might have to say, because in countries like Korea, where we live, or maybe even India, or maybe China too. Like there's a few names that are really popular. A few names that are really popular. So if you just give your last name on a reservation, 10 people might have the same last name making a reservation.
Yeah, if you're
like from
Asia,
Asia. If you like from Asia, for example,
China or Korea, and you're
maybe from China or Korea, Asia. 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 Asia, 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 Asia.
So if you just give your last name on a reservation, 10 people might have that same last name making a reservation.
Yeah.
If you were
if you're
from
like
Asia,
for example, maybe from China or Korea, and your family name was Lee, and you said Lee, it might be too common. It might be too common. It might be too common. There might be potentially other customers that have that same family name. So you have to leave for your full name just to be safe.
Yes, that's not as much of an issue
that's not as much of an issue
in
Western countries like Canada or US.
So
Andrew, we actually have a part 2 to this conversation, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So
that's correct. So in part 2,
we're going to hear a follow-up where the customer calls the restaurant again, calls the mystique,
and just confirms his reservation. So let's listen to part 2 of this conversation now.
This is the Mystique.
This is the Mystique.
Hello.
I'm just calling to confirm my reservation for tomorrow night.
What's the name
of under the reservation? McGrady?
Yes.
We have you here as a party of 2, 7:30 on the patio. That's correct?
Yeah,
that's right.
And
I know it's last minute, but would it be possible to push our reservation up just a bit to like 6:30?
I think we can squeeze you in then, but
I think we can squeeze you in then.
It'll have to be a high top near the bar. Is that all?
But it will have to be the high top near the bar.
All right with you?
Is it that all right with you?
Yeah, sure.
That's fine.
Thanks again
for feeding
No problem,
us.
Sir.
Thanks again for feeding us in earlier.
Look forward to seeing
No problem, sir. We look forward to seeing
you tomorrow night.
Tomorrow night.
Okay, like we said,
this is a follow-up conversation. It's sometimes customary for people to call back the night before just to make sure their reservation is on the books.
You don't want to show up and then find out.
You don't want to show up and then find out your reservation was magically erased or something. So the person calls back and he makes his first expression, which is, I'm calling to confirm my reservation for tomorrow night. I'm calling to confirm my reservation for tomorrow night. Exactly. So
if we think about it a bit, this customer
actually
doesn't want to confirm his reservation. He wants to change
confirm his reservation. He wants to
for tomorrow night. I'm calling to confirm my reservation for tomorrow night.
Exactly. So if we think about it a bit, this customer actually doesn't want to confirm his reservation. He wants to change his reservation.
He's kind of breaking the ice and just
making sure first that the reservation was made and there were no errors errors, and that was actually written
in the
reservation book, as you mentioned, Cassie. So he confirms first by saying, hello, I'm calling to confirm my reservation for tomorrow night. And then the host and the customer confirm the reservation, everything's okay. And then he asks the question that he originally called for, right? He says, would it be possible to push our reservation up to 6:30? Would it be possible to do blah blah blah? It's just a really polite way to ask a question. So would it be possible to push our reservation up to 6:30? Push up is the this is the phrasal verb.
Phrasal verb that is separated.
And this is a phrasal verb that can be separated. You can put the object of the sentence in between.
Push and up.
In between. Push up.
Push what? Push our reservation.
So push what? Push our reservation up to 6:30. Meaning to move it an hour earlier in the day.
Yeah, the opposite of push back.
The opposite of push back.
Right.
Push back would be if you wanted to show up maybe at 8:30 or 9 o'clock, right? And you could say, could we push our reservation back? But if you want to change it to earlier, then you could say, could we push our reservation up? Exactly. And there's a lot of requests that you can make that aren't this example conversation, such as, would it be possible to get a window seat? Or would it be possible to get a booth? Would it be possible to have a birthday song for my grandmother? It's her birthday tomorrow. Something like that. Would it be possible to add an extra person to? Would it be possible to add an extra person to our reservation? Could we change it from 2 people to 3 people, or 2 people to 4 people, something like that. So yeah, you're right. You can use this kind of question pattern to ask about many different kinds of changes. Good. So after he asks that question, the host says a really cool phrase. I think we can squeeze you in. I think we can squeeze you in. Andrew, what does squeeze you in mean?
Yeah, so
if you squeeze somebody in, it means that you make space available for them, even though you are very busy, right? So the restaurant, we can imagine at this time is very busy. There aren't too many extra tables available, but the host will make a special accommodation, and they will be able to welcome them for dinner at that time. So squeeze in just means fit into a very busy schedule or a very busy situation.
And in this case,
they had to switch where they were sitting to, right, Andrew? Instead of being on patio, they are switching to a high top near the bar, which are usually just like small tables that are high off the ground, where only about 2 people can sit at usually.
So
it's more like bar seating instead of regular dining seating. So maybe not as comfortable, but I guess the restaurant is too busy at the time, so that's only table available. So the customer agrees, yeah, no problem, they will do, that's fine. And then he says, thanks for fitting us in, and that just means thanks for making a special accommodation for us, even though the restaurant is very busy, and thanks for making room for us in this busy situation. That is fitting us in this context.
Okay, so we're almost at the end of today's episode, but
okay, so we're almost at the end of today's episode, but before we go, let's summarize what we've covered.
All right, so today we learned
learned about how to make dinner reservations over the phone at a restaurant using English.
We learned
how to make a reservation and common questions that may come up when making a reservation over the phone, such as I'd like to make a reservation for blank people tonight.
Yeah, I'd like to make a reservation for two tonight.
Yeah, I'd like to make a reservation for 2 tonight.
Or we also learned,
okay, what time will you be joining us that evening? We also learned expressions such as party, the number of people who are dining together, and seating, such as outdoor seating, patio seating, or high-top seating. And we learned useful expressions for confirming an existing reservation, such as I'm calling to confirm my reservation for tomorrow night.
And finally, we learned ways to modify
an already existing reservation.
For example,
would it be possible to push up my reservation to so-and-so time to 6:30?
That's all for now.
That's all for
Talk
now.
to you next time.
Talk to you next time.
Real talk.
That's all for now. Talk to you next time.